Metal clay is made by taking powdered metals, such as bronze, and mixing water and organic binder together until the powdered metal becomes damp and starts rolling together, coming together in a ball. Then this clay is taken and conditioned. By that I mean that it is handled and rolled out. You're basically trying to push the water throughout the clay so that it becomes very consistent and very soft to work with. You get all the lumps out of it. At the end of it, you want it to feel just like a modeling clay or a ceramic clay that's been conditioned to use to throw like on a pottery wheel. Once I've gone through this process, I usually let the clay sit and just rest for a couple of hours before beginning to use it. Now, in making this twig bracelet, the first thing that I want to do with the clay is actually create the understructure. So what I'm going to do is roll out the clay in between some markers just to keep the thickness consistent. That will guarantee that it will fire consistently through. And I'll take this band of clay and I'm just going to basically fit that across a pattern that I have laid out on a piece of paper that gives me the correct shape and size that I want to start with. Now, this clay will actually shrink about 10% in the kiln, so it's important to start with the right size. I've laid down a Teflon sheet and I've taken that band of bronze and now I'm just going to fit it until I get exactly the right shape, and then it's going to sit and dry. That needs to get good and dry and stiff so that I can use it in the assembly process. Now, to make the twigs, I take more of the clay and I'm just rolling out a small thin snake. I just keep rolling until I get it to the right size. And then I'm going to cut it into segments. And this is going to be the bases. I'm going to start sticking these together to make these little X-shaped or cross-shaped sticks. And once it's wet, so I'm putting water on each one of those, it kind of makes the clay a little slippery. So now they will sort of stick to each other. I'm adding some more water on there to soften the clay up. And this is the sculpting process. I wet sculpt each one of these pieces first. And what I'm doing now is just going back on each of these and adding in the details, the little knot holes, the texture of the bark, just where, a piece of the little twig may have fallen off. Now, each one of these will be different, and I like doing that instead of casting or making a form for these because it looks more organic when you pull them all together to use them in a piece. And you want variations in the shapes and sizes. It's just when it pulls together, whether it's in a bracelet or a necklace, it has a lot more interest. Now that everything is dry, and that usually takes overnight to get good and dry, I start doing the dry work. Now what this consists of is sanding each piece, getting all the rough edges off, beginning to take some of the material off. I do an additive and subtractive process where I start and I add pieces together and then I start taking away material. So now I'm going in and adding details to the edges on the end, these little knot holes or the end pieces of the twigs. I do this as much because it adds a little interest when you're wearing the jewelry and you see the end. It looks less like a piece of clay that's been rolled out like a snake, and it looks a little more sculptural. But I also do it to remove material, and I do that on the back. I carve out the backs of each of these little pieces now because all of that weight adds up when you're putting it on a necklace or a bracelet. So I want to remove as much as I can and still maintain the integrity of the piece. All right, so everything has been dried, carved, and sanded. Now it's time to start adding the pieces to the base of the bracelet. Now I'm adding these pieces on with slip made out of the same metal clay. And I can only add a couple of these at a time because as you add the slip, you're actually adding moisture back to the clay, and that will soften everything up. So I have this bracelet actually standing in some rice that helps support the bracelet base so that I can work on it. Now I will sit and try different pieces that I made until one fits a little bit better than the other, and as soon as I figure out where it fits really well, I will take it and wet the piece a little bit, add the slip, and then I have to add the piece right on before I forget where it goes. And like I said, I do a couple of these and then I have to put it aside and let it dry. So it usually takes all day or sometimes 2 days to add all those sticks on because of the drying time in between. But once it's all done, I let it sit overnight and dry and stiffen up really well. And the last thing that I do is I just add one of my little Hallmark discs onto the inside of the bracelet. And that's just added using a little water and a little slip. Basically just glue it in place. Now that slip, again, when this bracelet goes into the kiln, will act like solder. It will just glue and solder every piece together. It's all made out of the same material anyhow. This is the time where I look at the bracelet and I turn it around and I see if there's any details I've missed. It's my last chance to sort of go in and carve something out or add a little piece here or there. Make sure I got all the details where I want it. Now to fire it, it goes into a steel pan and it's supported by coconut carbon. That goes into the kiln for a 2-phase firing process, a burnout phase and then the firing phase where the clay turns back into a metal. That usually takes all day, and I usually cool overnight and then extract the piece the next day. This is always the fun part, but also the most scary part because, you know, if you have a bad firing, all that work you did, all the carving, all the sculpting, everything is just wasted. So this piece fired out great. Taking a wire brush to it, I start the cleaning process here. I just start scrubbing all the oxidation off the bracelet first that happens in the firing. And then I take it to a radial wheel. This is going to get down in all those little cracks and all those little details that I sculpted in. This radial wheel will get down in there. I add patina and hand polish, and the final piece is a beautiful, soft, golden color. The patina brings out all those little details. And you can see in these pieces all the different ways that I'm using these twigs and these sticks to create different designs.